Good evening, everyone. Have your attention. Good evening. Welcome. I guess it started raining a few minutes ago, eh? Well, thank you for coming out this evening. I'm sure your trek through the puddles are going to be well rewarded. My name is Marty Wood, and I'm an associate professor in the Department of Physiology and Health Science. On behalf of our department's John P. McGovern Committee, I'd like to welcome you to this, our 29th annual lecture. We're so happy you're here to celebrate this evening with us. I'd like to first thank the members of our McGovern Committee, Ms. Charity Bishop, Dr. Marie Kelly Warden, Ms. Lisa Beck, and student member Amy Baker. Special thanks also goes to Michelle Jones for her multimedia assistance and to our splendid administrative coordinator, Debbie Morris, and Departmental Secretary Kim Petty for their assistance as well. Before I introduce this fall's distinguished recipient of the John P. McGovern Award, permit me to tell you a few things about our benefactor and the namesake of the award. Since 1984, the McGovern Lecture Series has been made possible through the generosity of internationally regarded pediatric allergist, Dr. John P. McGovern. Dr. McGovern's friendship with our department's founder, Dr. Warren Schaller, led to a continuing legacy of financial support to us over the years. Past recipients of this award have included Dr. C. Everett Koop, former Surgeon General, Dr. Henry Heimlich, medical innovator, Mr. Robert Bazell, NBC science correspondent, Graham Kerr, television's Galloping Gourmet, and anti-bullying pioneer Kevin Jennings. This year's award recipient is in extraordinary company, and she has certainly earned her spot on this roster. Rae Pica has been a children's physical activity specialist since 1980. A former adjunct instructor with the University of New Hampshire, she is the author of 18 books, including the award-winning Great Games for Young Children and Jump into Literacy. She's shared her expertise with such groups as Sesame Street, Head Start, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports, Nickelodeon's Blue's Clues, Gymboree, and innumerable state health departments. And she's a regular contributor to Huffington Post, frequently advising teachers and other adults about translating and filtering popular culture for children. In addition, Rae is co-founder of the BAM radio network. Does that have an exclamation point on it? BAM. Okay. BAM radio network, the world's largest online education radio network, and she's host of 2 radio programs on the Educators Channel, Teacher's Aid, and Body, Mind, and Child, for which she interviews experts in education, child development, play research, the neurosciences, and more. She's the founder and director of movingandlearning.com and has served on the task force of the National Association for Sport and Physical Education that created national guidelines for early childhood physical activity. Not everyone in this room has raised a child. Certainly not everyone in this room has taught a child. But I can confidently assert that everyone in this room has been a child. So we all know from personal experience how much children need to run and swing and jump and skip and spin and laugh and move. We should be deeply disturbed as school districts cut recess time and pare down physical education to 1 day a week or less, in the process strapping kids motionless into seats for more and more of their school day. If there's ever been a time for a powerful, energetic, and enthusiastic advocate for children and physical activity, it is now. Therefore, it is my great honor and unique privilege to present the 2013 John P. McGovern Award to Ms. Rae Pica.
Hi. I am just thrilled to be part of this incredible tradition, and I'm deeply honored to be the recipient of this year's McGovern Award. So I thought I'd start by sharing a secret about me. I didn't grow up dreaming about being a children's physical activity specialist. I mean, who would? Okay, thank you. I'll snuggle right up there. From the time I was a little girl, I believed I was going to be a writer. It was in my genes, in my blood, on my mother's side. Her uncle had received a Pulitzer Prize, actually, for his work as a journalist, and his writing helped to set an innocent man free from prison, which was pretty impressive stuff. Not nearly as impressive was the 20-page novel that I wrote when I was in 4th grade and forced my family to listen to in my grandparents' living room, nor the many, many, many rejection slips I accumulated over my brief career as a freelance writer. It wasn't until I was 24 that I started dancing. I took a dance class. I'd gotten a love also of dance from my mother's side, but we couldn't afford classes when I was a kid. So I started at 24 with a group of 5 other women and a teacher who was a former vaudevillian. And it changed the course of my life. The first time I got up on stage for a recital, and I refused to call it that at the time because I was, after all, an adult, I really enjoyed the applause. It beat the heck out of running to the mailbox for rejection slips. So I decided I wanted to dance for a living. Yes, I was that naive. But that's probably why I was able to make it work on some level. It wasn't long before some parents asked me to teach dance to their preschoolers, and it really wasn't long before I realized that the little ones didn't need dance technique as much as they needed opportunities for creative self-expression and your basic body and spatial awareness. That's when I began studying movement education and using the little guys as guinea pigs. Eventually, I became the movement lady who went into the local child care centers and preschools, 45 minutes a week, and I later hired and trained instructors so I could essentially be in more than one place at the same time. And here's another secret about me. When I created and packaged a curriculum to take the place of those darned instructors who were just so frustrating, I thought it would sell around the world and make me enough money to go back to dancing. Yes, I was that naive. I vividly remember sitting on the dock on the lake across the street from where I lived, feeling absolutely despondent. I had gone to a great deal of trouble to prepare a mailing for this fabulous product, and it had resulted at that point in one sale. And it was becoming pretty clear to me that I hadn't a clue about marketing or about the value of movement in early childhood, which was fairly non-existent at the time. Also, I probably wasn't going to dance for a living, not if I needed to feed myself. Cue violins. But a funny thing happened along the way. As I continued on the path, because I got some serious stubbornness from my father's side, physical activity for children became a passion for me. I started doing workshops on the topic, and the more I learned, the more strongly convicted I felt about children's need to move. The more I learned, the more strongly convicted I felt about education of the whole child and movement's role not just in physical development, but in social, emotional, and cognitive development as well. I was appalled by the reaction of early childhood professionals early on. I mean, they backed away from me as though I were a dentist approaching with a drill. And it was, they move enough, they move enough. They didn't want to do anything to encourage more movement. Marty, you're such a lovely audience, laughing over there at all of my jokes. The last thing they really wanted to do was encourage more movement, but I could see there had to be more movement, so I pressed on. Sadly, things have only gotten worse since then. Not in early childhood, among the early childhood professionals who have come to understand the importance of movement in the child's life and education, but with an educational climate that doesn't allow for movement. We know the human body was designed to move, especially in childhood. We know there's a childhood obesity crisis raging. We know that there is a link between moving and learning. We know that the child's preferred mode of learning is movement. Why would we teach them in any way that wasn't their preferred method, that they didn't enjoy, that didn't appeal to them? We know that children learn about themselves and the world around them by physically experiencing it. They have to get high and low to really understand the quantitative concepts of high and low. They have to bend and stretch and twist to fully understand the realm of their personal space, and that understanding helps them in many ways, including in reading and writing, surprisingly. They have to tiptoe to soft music and stamp their feet to loud music to truly comprehend the quantitative concepts of light and heavy and the musical element of volume. They have to act out words and stories to fully comprehend their meaning and to make them relevant to them. And young children, aren't the only ones. When I'm learning to crochet a new pattern, I can't just read the instructions and have them make sense to me. I have to do it at the same time that I'm reading those instructions, or I just don't know what they're trying to tell me. How many of you still count on your fingers? I know I do, yes, absolutely. How many of you, when looking at a map, have to turn and face in the direction in which you're going to be heading? I can tell I'm not the only one. So how many of us would have retained more of what we learned in school far better if we had had the opportunity to physically experience it instead of just hearing about it or reading about it? Still, despite all this knowledge that we have, we insist on treating children as though they exist only from the neck up, as though they consist of brains alone. In George Graham's book, Teaching Children Physical Education, he tells the story of going to school boards to fight for the inclusion or the return of physical education to the curriculum. And he says, yes, it would be, fantastic and quite cost-effective if we could just bust their heads to school. But they do happen to be attached to something. And then in that same book, there's a wonderful cartoon of children walking headless into the gym. So I guess the moral is we must not think in the gym or move in the classroom. Never the twain shall meet, right? Come on. Oh, well, one must turn it on first. Wait for the little green light. One must first know which button she's pushing. There we go. Thank you. There you go. It was worth the wait, wasn't it? When Descartes, that philosopher guy, said, "I think, therefore I am," he started this belief in the mind and body as separate entities. I don't know why it caught on. I certainly don't know why it's lasted as long as it has, but I'm here to tell you it's nuts. Cuckoo. And it's doing our children a great deal of harm, truly. Where children's physical domain is concerned, we have a lot to worry about. We have statistics like these. I mean, really. 2 to 5-year-olds watching TV 25 and a half hours a week, and a Kaiser Family Foundation study not long ago showed that children 8 to 17 are engaged with electronics 37 and a half hours a week, which is a full-time job, 37 and a half hours a week. We have almost half of the children, 5 to 8, showing at least one heart disease risk factor, including obesity, which is growing at a faster rate among children than among adults, and hypertension. And yes, hypertension. I can't even think the two words, 5-year-old and hypertension, in the same sentence. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. And the first signs of arteriosclerosis showing up at age 5. And these are, of course, new, because these risk factors weren't before seen in people under the age of 30. And there's more. Children 6 to 10 dying of sudden cardiopulmonary arrest. Not too long ago, a few years back, a CDC study told us that children, American children born in the year 2000, face a 1 in 3 chance of developing type 2 diabetes. A 1 in 3 chance. And type 2 diabetes used to be called adult onset diabetes because it wasn't seen in children. Now it's just so prevalent among children, they've changed the darn name of it. And you've probably heard that this may be the first generation of children who will have shorter lifespans than their parents. I mean, it's really, really frightening stuff. Because we value the brain more than we do the body, we focus on academic skills to the detriment of physical skills. I've come to accept that movement skills are considered far more important than numeracy and literacy skills and such, although it has caused all of this white hair. But when we pretend children don't have bodies, we don't prepare them to be lifelong movers. A study not long ago showed that only 2% of inactive children grew up to be active adults. Only 2%. That means that the other 98% are in for a world of hurt, because those statistics up there are only the beginning. But here's the irony. Because we value the brain more than we do the body, we should be paying attention to the research, and there's so much of it, showing the relationship between moving and learning. Proving that the mind and body aren't separate entities. That's Jake, my best friend's grandson. He's in 1st grade now. So we've known for a long time that a child's earliest learning is based on motor development. We now know, too, that so is subsequent knowledge. The connection between moving and learning doesn't stop after the child takes his first step. We know now that early movement experiences are beneficial to optimal brain development. Thanks to brain research, we know that the cerebellum, the part of the brain commonly linked to movement because of its role in balance and motor memory and coordination, is also, according to Eric Jensen, who's the author of many books on brain-based learning, a virtual switchboard of cognitive activity. It turns out the cerebellum also plays significant roles in memory and counting and ordering and other cognitive activities. Isn't he adorable? Now, it won't surprise you to learn that a child's body image influences his emotional health, but it also impacts positively his learning ability and intellectual performance. We know that sitting increases fatigue and reduces concentration, and that physical activity activates the brain much more so than doing seat work. So let's make them sit a little longer. We know that moderate to vigorous intensity activity, physical activity, delivers oxygen, water, and glucose to the brain. That's brain food. Now, we may skip a meal or two here and there, but we wouldn't consider going days, going weeks, months, years in some cases without feeding our bodies, but we do that to our brains when we don't get moderate to vigorous intensity physical activity. A friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Marjorie Corso, did some really interesting work showing a correlation between body space awareness and paper space awareness. She found, for example, that children who have no sense of personal space, they're the ones who are always bumping into everything and everybody and lining up too closely to one another, they write in a similar manner with their letters falling one over the other. She found that children, for example, she would ask some children to reach for the ceiling, and some were always reaching with the same arm. And when she requested samples of their papers, whether they were writing or drawing, depending on the level they were at, she found that that quadrant of body space not used is the same quadrant of paper space not used. And she found that children who cannot cross this midline of the body, who cannot do that or that, were sometimes reading and writing down the middle of the page, sometimes writing halfway across the page, turning it over, and starting again. But how could this be? There's no connection between the mind and the body. I'm going to start demanding a commission from Dr. Hannaford for this book because I'm promoting it all over the country. Smart Moves, Why Learning is Not All in Your Head, written by Dr. Carla Hannaford. As I said earlier, she's a neurophysiologist, which is something that just, goes right over my head. But it is a book that I would like every teacher and future teacher and parent and future parent to read, to understand that connection between moving and learning, between the body and the mind. But in this book, she tells the story of Todd, who at 16 years old could not read. And it was not for lack of trying, because they tried everything. They tried, they spent money, they spent time, they spent energy trying to help Todd to read. He was also a very tall boy, and they would have loved to have had him on the basketball team in high school, but he couldn't get from point A to point B while dribbling a ball, which, is a bit of a prerequisite for playing hoops. And then his mother discovered Paul Dennison's Brain Gym. I don't know if any of you have heard of Brain Gym, but it's very cool stuff. And there are a lot of brain gym activities in Smart Moves. And she came home and said, Todd, we're going to cross crawl. And that's just standing at touching opposite elbow to knee. It's one of those old exercises Richard Simmons used to do back in the day. I don't think he knew he was exercising our brains as well. So to make sure that Todd cross-crawled, every morning before he went to school, the whole family did it. And every night before he went to bed, the whole family did it. 6 weeks later, Todd was reading at grade level. Voila. He also got a place on the high school basketball team, and he went on to study biology in college, which is pretty darn cool for a kid who couldn't read at 16. Dr. Hannaford says this wasn't coincidence, it wasn't a miracle, it was to be fully expected. Todd had all the information he needed up there in the two hemispheres of his brain. It just was not communicating across the corpus callosum, that lovely matter between the two hemispheres. Let me read to you what she says. Cross-lateral movements, like a baby's crawling, activate both hemispheres of the brain in a balanced way. These activities work both sides of the body evenly and involve coordinated movements of both eyes, both ears, both hands, and both feet, as well as balanced core muscles. When both eyes, ears, hands, and feet are being used equally, the corpus callosum orchestrating these